Start writing that email. Give me 2 seconds. I'll go look now. You can't go into my account.
And here we are. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the BIC Stationery Teachers Roundtable discussion and webinar. I'm so glad you've been able to make it. It's a pleasure to be in your company. So today's session and the purpose of today's session is for you to gain diverse professional insights and implementable solutions from industry experts, right? And the whole purpose of all of this is to help you overcome those some of those challenges that you're experiencing in the education sector or as an educator. And just by way of introduction, my name is Refilwe Mpakanyane, and I am your host for this morning. It's an absolute pleasure to be in your company. So before we start off the program and before I let you know everything else that you can expect for the rest of our conversation, just a few housekeeping rules to keep in mind so that we can have a smooth panel discussion, right? Below you or below the screen is a chat functionality and Q&A box. If you just look at your menu bar in the on the Zoom screen. So please do feel free to engage with your peers. You can send messages between and to each other. But I think the most important part, of course, of this morning is sending and addressing your your questions, rather, to the experts and the panelists, right, that are part of this discussion. If you want to address or pose your question directly to one of the panelists, by all means, please do tag them, put that name next to your question. Otherwise, I will be the traffic controller and I will direct the questions to the relevant people in our Q&A segment. Something to keep in mind, if you haven't followed us on social media yet, those handles that you need to go to, those handles that you can use, Instagram, that is BIC_stationery_SA, that's the Instagram handle. If you head on over to Facebook, the handle there is @BIC_stationery. The Twitter handle is @BICgroup, right? The YouTube handle is @BICgroup official, and then the LinkedIn handle is simply @BIC, that's it. And please do remember throughout our conversation, should you want to tweet, post on Insta, any videos, any social media references, that hashtag for today's panel discussion is BIC Stationery Webinar. BIC Stationery Webinar is the hashtag for this morning's discussions. If you're experiencing any technical issues, go to the chat box. Our technical team is on standby. They'll be able to talk you through any issues you might be having. And if you need a bathroom, you know where to go. Find the closest one to you. And of course, the most important thing for today's discussion is simply that we all have fun, that we make use of the experts on our panels, right, and get insights from them. So start thinking of your questions, pepper them throughout our discussions, and just take note, or do remember that we will, of course, have breakout sessions after the panel discussion where many of your questions might be answered, but that will be followed up by a Q&A session before we close off today's panel discussion. So please start lining up those questions and just make sure that you get the utmost out of today's discussion. So let's have fun, let's relax, and let's share some ideas and get some support mechanisms in place so that when we all leave here, be it parents, especially teachers and educators, we all have some workable solutions to help us with the challenges of teaching and working during COVID-19. So let's kickstart the program with the person who's behind all of this, the person who's behind South Africa's BIC Stationery portfolio, Ms. Kutlwano Tsetlane. Kutlwano Tsetlane, thank you so much for making all of this happen this morning and making it a possibility. Thank you and good morning.
Good morning, Refilwe. Thank you for the lovely introduction. It is my absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you, panelists, and thank you, teachers, for attending. So I'm not going to speak very long. I'm just going to give a brief introduction. So for us, education is a fundamental driver of personal, national, and global development. And this for us arguably makes teachers the greatest influences in society. Teachers give students purpose, they set them up for success, they play such a supportive role. Sometimes they're social workers, sometimes they're parents, and they really inspire and drive students to do well and to succeed in life. Education for us at BIC is very, very important, and it is very much ingrained in our DNA. we continuously work to improve the lives of and learning conditions of students, not only in South Africa, but globally as well. And we really strive to help students to reach their full potential. So one of the ways that we do this is through our annual Buy a Pen, Donate a Pen program. And this program has been around for 8 years and has given away or donated an astonishing 11.5 million pens and pencils to under-resourced children or students in South Africa. So building upon this, and in an effort to do more to support education, specifically teachers, we commissioned a nationwide study with Big Mama's Famous Truth Shop. The study aimed to identify some key challenges, some tension points, or some pain points that are faced by educators in our country. And we as a brand wanted to understand, what can we do to help? So we've since launched the BIC Stationery Teachers Group on Facebook, and this is really to help to address the needs that we've identified through the research study. And as a next step, we decided to host this, our very first webinar, so we're super excited. And it's really about getting the village, so to speak, to come together to speak, to address some of these challenges that we've identified. And we understand that these challenges are not only faced by teachers, but by parents and by students alike. So it is our aim to use this particular platform to cultivate support, to empower, to provide some relevant and practical tools that will allow us to overcome some of the challenges that we identified. So I'd like to thank you, Refilwe. I'd like to thank our panelists. Of course, I'd like to thank our attendees for their time. And I hope that you'll all find the session very valuable. So let's write the future of education together. Thank you, Refilwe.
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Kutlwano. And that's exactly it, right? As Kutlwano ended off with her introductory words, let's write the future of education together. I don't think anyone who's attending, who's part of this webinar or even the panel discussion today, can dispute the fact that none of this works unless we are all, every single person, the learner or the student, the parents, especially the teachers and educators, involved and invested. So the key is definitely to support each other and just to give ourselves or give each other coping mechanisms and help each other along the way. So yes, absolutely, Kutlwano. It's really key that the industry as a whole and educators just work together, work collectively to support each other. And it's so very, I'm going to use the word cool, that BIC Stationery is, that responsible brand and responsible and caring corporate citizen that has made it their duty to come on board and just to provide assistance for educators in the ways in which that you've identified through your research, to say, hang on, there is a tangible and meaningful way that we can make a difference. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. Joining Kutlwano and the panel, we do have an incredible group of people, a group of experts that I'm very excited to introduce to you. You won't hear their names, you won't be hearing their names for the very first time in today's webinar. You know them individually, on their own, through their own work. Their names and their reputations precede them. But let me start this way. Sibusiso Masumbuka, good morning. Sibusiso is a passionate educator. If you've ever seen him online or doing any interviews, he's a sports administrator, a choir coordinator, life orientation teacher, as well as grade 11 head. And Sibusiso advocates quite energetically and passionately for transformative, holistic teaching styles. You'll have heard this phrase from him: teach children the way they learn. My goodness, I wish I had more teachers like that coming up. But after starting a YouTube video called Swaggy School Teacher, Sibusiso has been celebrated for being instrumental in assisting learners with remote working during hard lockdown. So Sibusiso, you are going to bring it, ne? With the insights.
I will. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction.
All true, nothing but a pleasure. Our next panelist this morning is Riabetswe Bays. Riabetswe is the founder of Shrink Mama. She is an experienced counseling psychologist covering children, adolescents, as well as adults, so the whole family. And Riabetswe has got a special interest in play therapy and is passionate about providing practical resources, right? The stuff that we can actually implement easily and within our everyday lives in order to help parents or guide parents in exploring emotions as well as coping strategies for their children. really key and important work that you do. Good morning to you, Riabetsui. Thank you so much for being part of the panel.
Good morning, Refilwe. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Absolute pleasure. Lara Schoenfeld is our next panelist, who is an experienced occupational therapist. Lara is the founder of Nanny and Me and co-founder of PlaySense, as well as a certified life coach and former lecturer at the University of Cape Town. So Lara has devoted a large part of her life to developing play-based programs to optimize toddler development and give children the very best start to their learning journey. Good morning to you, Lara.
Hi, everybody. It's such a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Looking forward to your insights this morning, Lara. It has been such a difficult time, and I think the first thing that goes out of the window when we're all stressed or trying to juggle a lot of things is play, right? And opportunities to learn through the less sort of didactic methods of education. So really looking forward to your insights.
Thank you.
And last but not least is Vanessa Raffaeli. Of course, she's got a background with leading top glossy women's magazines. She's an author and media consultant, as well as the founder of The Village, a parenting group on Facebook. A highly recommended platform that's used by parents, essentially giving each other tips, recommendations on how to best support their children, right? And they do discuss the challenges that they face and offer each other that advice that's much needed. Through Vanessa's own experience and of those of the community, Vanessa knows all about parenting in times of change and crisis. Good morning to you, Vanessa. And I must say, The Village being a vibrant and super useful resource that you've been able to set up. Good morning.
42,000 best friends to get us through the terrible teens. Anyone who thinks toddlers is bad hasn't spent any time on The Village. But the one thing is it is really better when we're all together. So I celebrate BIC and love the idea of this village as well. It really is, we are more powerful when we pull together.
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful. Thank you all for taking part in the discussion. A quick reminder, questions and comments, do head on over to the chat box. The Q&A is up and running, and just start populating the Q&A box with all your questions for our panelists. So now, as we all know, the education sector has been hit incredibly hard by COVID-19, the pandemic. Teachers have had to adapt, have had to innovate. Students have also had to do the same and adapt to a new norm, right? Overnight, just like that. We were told 3 weeks initially of a state of disaster. And here we are 18 months later, guys. And it's been different versions of adapting, changing, and going, okay, what's next? What works? So many schools, of course, have had to shift to online, have had to shift to remote learning. And what we've seen through that is that gaping digital divide that South Africans are dealing with. It's brought about a new set of challenges for students, for teachers, and for families. But like leaders across many different industries, educators have really come to the party, and they've also evolved and adapted how they work. Educators were forced to adapt in order to maintain the level of education that their students were receiving. And that meant that they had to modify how they teach their learners. So I've no doubt that not only did educators and even parents who are part-time educators, right, teaching from home, had to adapt, but you also had to pull on new resources in order to reinvigorate yourselves, but also invigorate and energize the children that you're teaching. So let's kick things off and just get a sense of what educators have been dealing with, but also what tools are in place or available for them to start adopting and utilizing 18 months into this pandemic, but of course going forward, right? So Sis, I'm going to start with you. And you know, you saw fit to start your YouTube channel, and you found innovative ways to teach and to reach your learners. But I want to get a sense from you about those really noticeable changes that you experienced as a teacher initially during COVID-19, right? And how did you go about just making sure that you didn't lose that human connection, despite the fact that you were grabbing at whatever resources you had to be able to teach? So were there specific resources available to you, tools perhaps that were given to you, or just creative teaching methods that you implemented during this time? What were those things? And of course, what can other educators grab from your toolbox and use for themselves?
All right. Thank you so much for that question. And, education has changed into a different realm for both educators and learners. Massive changes of, just education just happening in a physical sense where there's a school library, there's computers, there's a classroom, there's a teacher right in front of you that needs to, provide you with all the content and the knowledge that you need. So obviously that has changed to it happening in our homes for those who are privileged. There are many kids who did not have the resources to be a part of the lessons that I did on YouTube, for example, or, even on WhatsApp groups or Google Classroom, the different platforms that we needed to use as teachers to sort of engage with the kids. So, just speaking from my side, the many changes were obviously that, just education moving or schooling, not just happening in a physical sense, but obviously happening virtually. And, I can almost hear my lecturer speak to me again when in our first lecture, when she spoke about how schooling perpetuates the idea that, education can only happen at school. It can happen anywhere, and we're all responsible for it, not just as teachers as well. So how I try to, keep that human touch or human connectivity was with constant communication with my learners. I had to be one of those teachers who sort of had to let go of the boundaries of not having kids on WhatsApp, but now I needed to have them on WhatsApp and create groups where we're able to communicate and engage, because again, I cannot teach my kids if they're not regulated. I cannot teach my kids if they're going through whatever it is that they're going through. I mean, I think all of us here have gone through some form of stress or anxiety of just not knowing what's going to happen. Is it 3 weeks? Then it's 10 weeks. And it's, we're back in school in July. So communication with my kids was so, so important. And whether it was on WhatsApp, SMSs, and even communicating with the parents as well, because, there are some kids who are going to take chances and who knew that they wouldn't continue with their schooling. So, or rather they knew that would continue teaching or would restart, and why log in if the teacher's going to reteach the work later on. So that constant communication with the parents as well is so important. And yeah, so there are many various ways that I kept up with that human connectivity. And obviously when the kids came back, we needed to check up on them. How was the experience for you? What have you taken from this? How have you adapted to that change in the education sphere as well? So yeah, I don't know if you want to repeat that last bit of the question. I think that was quite a lengthy one.
I will, for those teachers, because obviously we are dealing with a rather unequal playing field, right? So I mentioned that digital divide, children and families who could not afford data, who have devices, who share devices, those practical tools and things, I guess, lo-fi tools that you were able to implement and access just so that the quality of your teaching didn't suffer, number one. Number two, you were able to still reach your learners and your pupils and still connect with them. What were those things that you reached to? They could, and they don't have to be fancy. I mean, some teachers live in a small community, so you go door to door and you say, hi guys, I haven't seen Usbusiso Namhlanje today. What's happening? Is everything okay? What worked for you?
So I definitely use the change as an opportunity for me to start a YouTube channel. So I knew that a lot of the kids, some parents were able to get those resources like an internet connection, etc., to still engage with the kids. And, I've taught on various online schools as well. And we've gotten to a point where we've reached almost over 3 million learners throughout the lockdown period, at least the first portion of it. So these things are working. And then obviously for the kids who did not have the resources, I joined the Department of Education with a SIP program where we went into township and rural communities and we taught the kids. And we were able to create and teaching lessons or methods that would allow the kids to sort of fill up with that gap that they missed out on, the big chunk of work that we missed out on during the lockdown period. And it was very exciting. So, we as teachers need to see this, or rather embrace this change and use it to also develop ourselves as educators as well.
Yeah, that self-development is key. And it benefits yourself and benefits the learners, absolutely. Riabetri, I'm going to come to you now and just get your insights, that constant change that I think is going to be the through line in all our discussions, right? Any discussion we have, a conversation under COVID is going to be met with constant change, constant anxiety, and we're having to adapt, we're having to react to that. But I want to get a sense from you how how learners and our parents, our children and our parents have adapted to the state of flux, right? And how are we still meant to think about the future? Because things are moving. It might be lockdown level 0 to 100. It might be, we never know when there's a family meeting that's going to just upend our lives. But essentially, we are in a state of flux 18 months into this thing. We have some answers regarding the vaccine, the virus itself. We know more about it, socially, work-wise, but most importantly, education-wise, flux. How have parents and children and even teachers adapted so far or dealt with things so far? And just advice on how to think about being flexible and looking to the future.
That's a great question, and I always like to start my sort of, a train of thought along the lines of we've never dealt with something like this before. We've never dealt with a pandemic of this magnitude before, so we were hit with this at the beginning of last year, and we immediately had to just adapt. We immediately had to adapt to whatever this was going to look like. We didn't know how long it was going to last. As you said, it was meant to be 21 days, and it's turned out to be however many. I've lost count now. But I think everybody has done exceptionally well. If you really think about where we were this time last year and where we are now, in terms of just psychologically and emotionally processing everything that has happened, it hasn't been easy. I think a lot of people have gone through a lot. What a lot of research has found is that whenever there is an event of this magnitude, whether it's globally or nationally, it actually does start to affect mental health. So people who struggled with any mental health issues find that their symptoms actually get worse. And in instances where there were no mental health issues at all, people actually start to develop them. So that in itself shows you the impact of having to deal with the ups and downs and the backs and forth of the pandemic. However, I think looking at now October 2021, a lot of teachers, a lot of parents, and a lot of children have done exceptionally well in terms of trying to make sense of what this new normal is. I know we've all heard that term, new normal, and we've had to be advised constantly to adapt to the new normal. And I think in terms of school, I think Sibusiso put it so beautifully in terms of just looking at what is available, looking at resources, looking at new and innovative ways of teaching and of engaging learners has worked really nicely. I think teachers have done a phenomenal job in terms of adapting completely to going online. Trying to engage children online is incredibly difficult, as well as trying to reach those children that are not available to engage with you and making sure that they don't fall behind. So I think people have just looked at what is available to us, especially as a nation, because I think there are a lot of inequalities, and we've really made it work. We've really tried our best in order to take what we need to and put it together and make it successful. And as far as parents are concerned, I mean, as a parent myself, I know it's been a very challenging journey where we've had to become mini teachers as well, so I hope you don't mind. I know a lot of teachers are like, you don't know what it's like to really be a teacher, but I think a lot of parents have really tried so hard to just incorporate teaching into day-to-day parenting, working from home, and just bringing the pieces together and just trying our best. And I always say to people, as long as you are doing your best, you're doing enough. And whatever that looks like, my best could be very different from your best, but we really are trying our best under the circumstances. And that being said, I believe that so many people have done really, really well at doing that. Of course, there's always room for improvement, and that's why we're having these conversations and these discussions to try and, bring our minds together and really figure out how we can do this better. But it really is a case of, so far, we've managed to expand in terms of the way that we are teaching children, the way that we're parenting, and the way that we're supporting one another.
And just a quick one, Riabetu, before I move on to Lara, in terms of from a mental health perspective, have we been good, or have we done well at catching children and spotting those gaps and saying, my child is not quite okay, let me reach out to a professional? Are we generally, as parents, even as as educators, will you let me know? And Lara and Vanessa, if you just want to weigh in on that, have we generally become more open and receptive to the idea that it's better to address a problem right now and catch any sort of red flags regarding mental health and wellness for our kids, for ourselves, and for our teachers. Are we good with that?
I think so. I mean, I think what COVID has done, you know, I mean, it obviously has caused a lot of upheaval, but what it's also done is highlighted those things, you know. So I know, for example, mental health organizations have just seen an upflux in terms of people reaching out and asking for help. Therapists have, you know, gotten a lot of requests for people that are requesting, you know, assistance or support or advice. So I think we are able to more easily identify when there is something going on and therefore address it. With children, you know, what I think makes it a little bit easier is you always tell in terms of their behavior. So you'll see in their behavior and their normal habits, you know, if your child was usually quite free and outgoing and they suddenly become withdrawn, you're able to say, okay, hold on, there's something going on here. And then we go and inquire and we try and find out what is going on. And I think teachers have also been able to do that. They know their children very well, you know, so they've been able to pick up and reach out and identify resources that can be useful. And I think just us in ourselves as adults as well, we've really been more mindful of our mental health and mindful of, okay, I'm really struggling. It's been a tough week. I've been locked indoors. I've been sitting in front of the screen. I need to do something about this. So I think more and more we are becoming more mindful of our mental health. But I think that was also as a result of COVID hitting us that hard. And we really had no choice but to pay attention to that.
So, Siso, are educators checking in on each other? You know how we say, check on your strong friend?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We did that all the time. And I think it's so important to also create that network of teachers, even if you don't get along with the staff at your work, but just to get along with other teachers from other schools and how they're doing things. I think every school had its own way of doing things and checking in on each other. But I think it was so important. I mean, at our school, we had many skills development trainings. We were able to help each other out. We started yoga, we started running, all these different things to sort of psych us up and still want to do this because we are so overloaded. So it was so important for us to do that. And I mean, I'm also lucky to be in a school where we do have a therapist who also does check in on teachers as well.
Yeah. Lara, I'm going to end this round of questions with you. Vanessa, obviously you run the village. The conversations on the village regarding mental health and just catching children and even each other when you know, at the right time. What do those look like?
Well, to give some background quickly to anyone who's not familiar with the village, it is fundamentally a group of 42,000 parents. And of those 42,000, 37,000 are active every day on that group. So the level of interaction is very, very high. And although I would love to think it's because I am so brilliant, it's not that. It's because I think human beings have a need to function in communities. It's really important for our health that we have connection and that we are connected to each other through generations, across socioeconomic groups, across religions and races. And unfortunately, in the world we live in and in South Africa as well, these are dysfunctional, they don't work. So luckily, and in one way, the ill of social media has been so wonderful that we've been able to create these communities that do, on the surface, break down a lot of those barriers and allow us to come together, to be honest, to talk about what is really going on and to connect with each other. And so the village and many others like it, many other social media groups actually allow us to communicate. And I think that is the most important and the most desperately needed thing is talking, honesty, transparency. So what I hear on the village every day, and from those 95% engagement, is that there has never been so much fear generationally. Older people, because of the unemployment, I think, the fear of unemployment and uncertainty, the parents have not been okay. And of course, if your rock, if mom, dad, or your guardian is not okay, the family is not okay. So it's been a cycle of acknowledging that we are all scared, acknowledging that there is fear, acknowledging that there's uncertainty, which also doesn't come naturally to a lot of us. We're very stoical, especially South Africans. You know, we are, I mean, I don't think I can say exactly the word but we are pushed forward. So these groups have allowed an expression of pain, an expression of fear, an expression of uncertainty, expression of disappointment in ourselves that is good. It's enormously important. But if you're a very small person, and I would say even teenagers are small people, their reality is so largely the family. So out of this anxiety and fear often comes, and again in our country, some sort of defense and aggression. And what I've seen is these flickers of defense and aggression between teachers and parents. Parents sometimes are very angry with the teachers. They are the punch bag. They're between the Department of Education and things that teachers absolutely have no power in, but that the parents have no other voice to get further than the teachers. So once that has been expressed, the beautiful thing about a group like the Village, where the rules are incredibly strong, you may not be disrespectful, you may not argue, is that once that has been expressed, we move very quickly into constructive. And so every day on that Village, I see requests on how to make things better. A lot of them come from mental health. Every day, 2 to 3 to 4 requests for psychological help. As I'm sure all our panelists know, social work intervention. A lot of advice required for that. A lot of talk about parental burnout. And so as a teacher, when you're talking to a parent who might appear not to be listening, not to be in a very responsive phase, but angry, what is driving that, I see, is this fear and uncertainty. So, but what is beautiful is once the conversation starts, and once we are allowed to express our reality and our truth in a moderated way, everything does get better. And it doesn't get right. Nothing comes right, but even small incremental changes make things better for both parent and school and teacher, as well as child. And of course, as the Village, we are here for the children. Our mission is to make a better future for all of our families. And talking actually does allow that. So breaking down barriers, breaking through the feelings, the emotions, and getting into the practical of how can we actually help you. And one of the most exciting things and positive things that has come out of this last year and a half is all the incredibly innovative ways that people have managed and are scrambling to manage to do things better.
Just give us a sort of top line sense of what those are, because someone might not be on the Village, but I'm just looking at a message here from Vanessa Rietbroek saying, as an HOD, I had to help my young staff through their fears before they could be the educators our kids needed, right? And now they're the most wonderful group. And so you're talking about the conflict that arises from uncertainty, from anxiety, that shows up as aggression, right? I will tell you, I'm in some WhatsApp groups, and we've seen some teachers butting heads with parents, albeit she put that message in the wrong group. So that was interesting. She didn't mean to. Well, it surfaces a lot of issues because it were all kind of grousing on the side going, geez, these guys, don't they know we're busy? We're trying to work now, the workload. And of course, they're doing their best as teachers and want the best for our children. So compassion is so key, but when you're facing burnout, it's difficult. You lose that perspective. Just those two sort of interventions or things that parents that you've noted are able to utilize to move beyond the conflict, because unfortunately it does and will happen.
Well, predictably, I'm an incredible believer in community. So gathering together to create smaller groups to help each other has been incredible. I've seen a lot of, excuse me, mini support groups with parents helping each other to help their own children. So they'll all get on a WhatsApp group and find out who's got the strengths, and maybe the one who is better at maths will help the kids, because it's also, I have a child who's an engineer. I can't help him in any way, shape or form. And I really couldn't help him with physics either. But my girlfriend, who is herself an engineer, was very much more able to step in and support. And the thing is, I think the most important thing was actually also understanding that nothing is the same and it will not go back to be the same. And also not waiting for a fairy godmother to come and wave a magic wand and make it better. It is so truly up to us to pull our weight. And often in some of the communities, there's a lot of grousing about the government particularly. And there's a space for that. But no amount of anger is going to change the status quo. What can change the status quo is our attitude and our commitment to the task at hand, and the understanding we don't have to fix everything. We are incapable of fixing everything. But one small improvement, such as a bunch of parents gathering together, pooling resources, helping each other, and therefore sharing the load, makes an enormous difference. And that was one of the very big ones. Sorry.
Fantastic. That's really key, right? Community, but also remembering your agency, right? Remembering your agency. Yeah. Laura, I promised and threatened. From your perspective as an occupational therapist, and of course the founder of Nanny and Me, just give us a sense of what has changed in terms of our ability to understand, to catch, to see mental health challenges potentially on the horizon and deal with them. And then I'll ask the next part, when you're done with that, I'll ask the next part of my question just regarding an online remote working environment and the repercussions of that. But have you noticed or tracked any changes from your side?
Absolutely. So I'm mostly working with 0 to 3-year-olds and educators working and OTs working with those little ones. And what we've seen is just little ones who've been born into lockdown, very little socialization, very scared of getting out the house and being around strangers, and even an increase in so-called autism features, which autism's all around not making eye contact or having delayed speech, some just being sensory sensitive. And it's been so interesting to just go, hang on a second, actually the environment has really stopped these little ones being stimulated in very normal social ways. So that's just one insight. But what I've loved about our discussion so far is just how I think we can be so academic focused. And I think what COVID has done to all of us is shown us that our learning, our ability to use this frontal lobe is so linked to our emotions and the emotional brain. And we're needing to protect that for educators, for parents, and for little ones. And all of us need to have different ways to work out those feelings in order to use this thing up here that we've been gifted with. So I love that, because I'm such a believer in attachment for little ones to enable that brain to work and not growing up in trauma and violence, and having play experiences which also enable them to develop and express stress as well. So I love the way emotions are now forefront, and our emotional health and our mental health in terms of our learning.
And we can't run away from it and pretend to be impervious. Darn it. Why do we have to be so human, Lara? So just, the fact that this education environment has changed, even the ability to socialize, as you just mentioned, right? So I know a few lockdown babies who only met their grandparents via a screen, and maybe when they were like 1.5 or closer to 1 year old, all sorts of complicated matters. But just talk to us about just the evolution of that educational environment, and perhaps the developmental and long-term impacts of working via a screen. But for those younger kids who are going to be learning to write, or ought to be learning to write, but instead will also be doing that in conjunction with typing, right? The impacts of that, because I've read a bit of literature around the link between your writing, fine motor skills, coordination, but also writing as a tool to aid memory, to aid recall. What are the implications for children who are growing up and getting educated in that kind of environment?
Thanks, Rafiwe. What a great question. So I just want to first say hi to everyone. And teachers are absolute superheroes, especially on this pandemic. And my best and scariest memories growing up are of my teachers. So I really want to just honor teachers today. Handwriting especially activates specific parts of the brain, which researchers believe are important for learning and memory. And one such researcher, Wiley, says that when you're writing by hand, you're not only activating the motor cortex, which is one part of your brain, because you're using your hand physically, but also the motor planning aspects of the visual cortex, so using your eyes and the part of the brain that speaks to that, because you're visualizing those letters in your mind. You're then using the language centers of your brain, which is in the center and behind your these lobes at the back, to actually communicate. And you're using the networks associated with reading and spelling. So it's still absolutely vital that children are taught handwriting at school to establish these neuronal patterns in the brain that are beneficial for learning and, as you said, memory. What else happens is when we use our hands to write, we're actually coding the left and right sides of the brain. They're being stimulated and synapses or communication is happening between these halves, especially through cursive writing. And when they've done brain imaging resonance on the brain, they show that this doesn't happen when children are typing. Other research shows that handwriting actually improves children's literacy because it's stimulating all these parts of the brain working together, which are the same ones involved in reading. It improves attention and cognition, so self-regulation or control is very important as well, and handwriting helps that. And then very importantly, we stress how important creativity is. Handwriting has been shown that a lot of authors, when they are researched, they argue that you actually have to learn to handwrite to think more freely, to brainstorm, to write things down, link ideas, and circle important points. And of course, you can do this on a screen, but distractions are always there. We always have a million tabs open, and that actually restricts our creativity. So what about keyboards? I think it's still, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and children should learn to write and type. And Berninger is a professor of education psychology, and she has undertaken extensive research which suggests that children should first learn printing, because that actually works on the reading centers of the brain. That transfers to better word recognition. Then cursive for spelling and composing and being creative. And then in late primary school, touch typing. And then also in terms of just being an OT and children who actually have proper writing difficulties, keyboards are a wonderful assistive device for those children. And I just want people out there to imagine building a puzzle. So imagine you're putting out a puzzle and you're building a puzzle in real time with real pieces, and you're looking and you're comparing and you're feeling them. Compare that to the so-called building a puzzle that toddlers do on a flat 2D device. It's just not the same. So using a keyboard and learning to write, you are really taking a lot away from the developmental aspects of brain development.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So we can't, as you say, technology helps us a lot, can't throw the baby out of the bathwater, but there's so much to be said for that tactile environment, right? Appealing to all the senses. So very important. Sure. So let me come back to you. Let me circle back to you now. And your philosophy on teaching, which I absolutely love, teaching children the way they learn. So enlightened, so exciting. But I wonder how you can advise teachers to practically do this, right? In terms of time, ability to connect and identify exactly what Refilwe, what makes her brain tick, what makes Vanessa's brain tick. Do most teachers have time to do that if they're already overloaded, right? How do they do their best to get this right in a situation where it's not always easy to pay individual attention? And then in instances of COVID-19, they're working remotely. What are the signs that teachers can look for when you go, okay, this will appeal to this learner's personality or ability to grasp matters? What's worked for you? What can you suggest?
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest, when I wrote that teaching philosophy, I was doing my PGCE at UJ, and I had no idea that I'd end up teaching in a pandemic. And I had no idea of the overload that teachers have. Until, I'm one of those people that doesn't like to back up on what they've said before. So really teaching kids the way they learn is a philosophy that encompasses how teachers need to be lifelong learners. You need to understand your learners. You need to study your audience. I think anyone that does a presentation in front of anybody needs to know the demographics of the people that they're presenting to. So knowing the age of the kids and what it is that people that are 16 years old, 15 years old normally do outside of school, where they come from. So what sort of backgrounds, financial backgrounds, or economic backgrounds they come from. The socioeconomic issues that we are experiencing within the community that you're teaching in. And then you draw in and bring in your creativity and teaching kids the way they need to learn. Because so many of us sat in classrooms with teachers who use traditional methods of teaching, just chalk and talk, which doesn't really work anymore. I mean, we all know if you have your back facing the kids, you already have the class being disrupted. So how do you find ways and identify ways in which you can teach kids? I've had to do some research in using the neurosequential model that also speaks to how you need to regulate kids, how you need to build a relationship with the kids, then you deliver the content. I've also learned about the Harkness teaching method that is used in Finland as well, that says that you as a teacher are a facilitator for learning. You need to let the kids engage with the content themselves before, without you just talking all the time. So there are many ways in which teachers can use. And again, I saw a comment there that speaks about how we need to find a balance as well as educators. So you need to find a way on how to balance all the different duties that you need to play, because again, the different roles and responsibilities that we have now sort of carried on us are things that allow us to develop as well. I mean, I had no idea that I'd be a COVID compliance officer, but I found ways on how I can improve myself and grow in my teaching career as well. So hopefully I can manage something else when I move up a post level. So really teaching kids the way they learn is really about teachers learning and understanding their kids and finding different ways of teaching their kids. Take them out into the field and teach them there. Create little groups for the kids that are able, where they'll be able to, teach each other, peer learning, where kids are not just hearing the information from the kids as well. Use different visual aids, videos, and some teachers will say that, well, we don't have enough posters, or that the government is not giving us enough posters. Make posters. The other day, I thought of a really creative idea as a life orientation teacher where I teach my kids about self-awareness. I brought my big mirror at home, I cut out nice words for the kids, and I said, now tell me about yourself. What do you see when you see yourself in the mirror? And that's another creative way to sort of teach the kids. So now when the kids look at the mirror, they see words such as, I am powerful, I am beautiful, I am smart. So that those are just the different ways in which teachers can use to sort of develop the kids as well. I was listening to my colleagues the other day in the staff room saying that these kids are not logging into Microsoft Teams. And I said, well, go on TikTok. Do your science experiment on TikTok. You need to find the kids where they are. If we're going to only use Google Classroom, or those are already learning platforms. We already know that the kids don't want to be in a classroom or in a formal classroom where the teacher's just talking all the time. But be on TikTok, start a YouTube channel, start an Instagram account. There's so many teachers who have started Instagram accounts that are just dedicated to their subject content. So really, what this pandemic and this era in teaching has taught us is to be really creative and innovative people. And we cannot back down on that or wait for resources. And I know it may sound a little insensitive, but really, how are you as a teacher? What are you doing? Looking at the resources that you have to sort of engage with the kids, to bring kids to the party. The time of waiting for the kids to come is no longer there. You as a teacher need to go into the environment in which the kids exist.
Yeah, sure. So you've thrown down the gauntlet there. Use the resources that you have and be as creative as possible. And it's not always going to be easy. But let's carry on our discussion. I know I'm looking at the time. We are going to go into our breakout sessions very, very shortly. But I want to find out from you. Lara, basically, when it comes to remote learning for primary school students, the importance of establishing that healthy balance between work, between play. What's a healthy ratio? Because I'm of the opinion that play has kind of out the window for many people, right? As we chase curriculums, as we chase meeting deadlines. What's a healthy ratio, and why is it important to keep play on the table?
Thanks, Rukue. I love this question. It's my passion. So, the World Health Organization says that up to 5 children should have 3 hours of physical activity every single day. And from the age of 5 onwards, they should have 1 hour per day of moderate to vigorous intensity of just physical activity. And that's every day. And that's because of all the mental and physical health outcomes. And I know, and even in the chat, there's been lots of comments about how the lack of the play, getting those emotions out, and the social aspect of that has really affected children. So an hour a day is what the World Health Organization would say for the primary school age children. But I just want to focus now on the play. And what is play? Play is self-motivated, it's fun, it's engaging. It's when children use their imagination, when they can be creative. And it's not always linked to an end goal, which sport often is. And especially with COVID, children have experienced trauma, and play is a natural way for them to connect socially and actually feel that belonging. It provides a context for emotional support, enjoyment, and physical activity, and develops their social identities. And that all contributes to their overall development and well-being. So just some tips for parents who've had little ones at home and older children is to just try and keep that routine. Again, going back to the brain, when I feel safe, and routine is really part of making our brains feel safe, then I can access that frontal lobe for learning. So it's a feeling safe, that I belong, then that emotional needs are met, and then we can actually learn. So keeping a routine is really important. And just looking on some of the homeschool sites, a lot of homeschoolers actually only ever do 2 hours of work with their primary age children, because you can fit so much more in. You can really focus on things they're struggling with, other things they find easy, you can skip over. So I would say to parents in lockdown, 2 hours of homework would be plenty. And then ensure they're getting that physical activity for 1 hour. Have dedicated spaces for homework, play, and then keep tech separate from those areas. And then any parents listening out there, let children be bored. I think we so want to entertain them all the time. We want to keep them busy. And actually what we're doing is we're not delaying gratification. It's just constant, instant gratification. We're not letting them be creative. Let them get out. My boys, the minute I say right outside, they're suddenly building forts and building pretend fires, and with very little around them. And so outdoor play is critical. Getting out into nature has been shown in research to help children de-stress. Then play together. I know that's difficult with COVID and other children in the neighborhood, but if you have your bubble that these are play dates, these are people that are being careful, keep those play dates going. And also play with your children as a parent. I would challenge everybody out there to just try this once and see if it doesn't have benefits for you and your family. But have a tech-free day. Say, right, guys, Saturday, we are not having tech from 8 until 6, all of us. Because the problem is when we as parents say, no tech, or we minimize the tech, we then whip out our phone for work. And children don't understand that double standard. So when you also put aside the phone and the tablet and everything, the screen, you'll find fun together. So looking out for physical activity opportunities for them. For parents, what's also happened is with the lack of extramurals, we've seen that children don't also need to be scheduled all the time. And I think that has actually been a good thing. The children need time to decompress and just play. So that playtime needs to be challenging. It needs to be creative. When children engage in something like leisure, like my one son, he's 11, he decided he was going to learn knitting. What he learned in that was a challenge and mastery of something new, building confidence. If he dropped a stitch, like, how do I do this better? And I think, again, when we just let them go to tech to keep them busy, there's no challenge really. It actually contributes to some of the negative feelings children are experiencing. And then lastly, I just want to advocate for parents and teachers listening. You guys need to advocate for play-based learning. We don't need to see work and play as a completely separate continuum where play's on one end of the spectrum and work's on the other. We actually need to bring them closer together. We need to use play to learn. And children still learn through play at primary school. And research shows us over and over again that play-based learning in the early years significantly improve children's language, social connections, memory, and creativity, and all the so-called 21st century skills of confidence, communication, and collaboration. So I absolutely want to bring that continuum a bit closer and just say, constant assessment, too much homework doesn't actually feed these skills that we need our children to learn.
Sure, who here can relate to the words, Lala, go play outside, come back you need to have lunch and come back just before the sun sets, but it's time for a bath and dinner time. Little did we know that our parents are onto something. Really important. But here's one, and a really serious one, Ria Betwi, and to build on Laura's point as well. This one is from Tasneem, saying it's really taken a toll on our learners. There's no sports, extramurals, right? To your point, but also saying that our SBST team has been so busy with referrals. We sadly had one suicide. So as a school, we're trying to run some motivational programs for our kids. Sadly, for so many kids, being at home more does mean being exposed to abuse. So, and school is our safe haven. So it's that weird tension that we're trying to, deal with and trying to straddle. And that is the extreme. Tasneem's experience is the extreme, right, of so many children's experiences, or is it? I don't know. But I guess the question for you, Riabet, was that not only have children's or students' educational environments been disrupted, but interacting and socialization, as Laura referenced, doesn't and can't happen the way it did before. So how can parents sort of compensate or find useful ways to make sure that kids don't go without or end up lacking, right? It might result in things like emotional outbursts. It might result in increased, energy that is not being burned, but it might just, I don't know, you'll tell us what it might result in, but the socialization and interaction that kids need, the peer-to-peer interaction that they can't get the way they used to. How do parents, solve for that? But then what are those other challenges and experiences that teachers as well as parents can sort of, I guess, try to make up for in the interactions with children and students?
And I think that's so important, and I think it's been touched on quite a bit in the chat. And I think, once that social element gets taken out, you really get to, get a sense of exactly how much people are struggling, because as humans, we're social beings. We want to be around one another. We want to hug and we want to, hold hands and all of that. And COVID has really stolen that away from us. And I think we do see the implications of that. Thankfully, we are at a point when, I think you mentioned this earlier, Refilwe, that, things are improving a little bit, and we're sort of seeing a little bit of, back to normality to some extent. But I think, for parents especially, and Laura mentioned it, just in terms of the importance of having some kind of a routine. So even if it means establishing a new routine with your children, it's important to have a routine because it provides the safety and the boundaries that children need in order to operate in the world. So once there is some kind of a routine or a structure, then we're able to put little things within there in terms of, okay, when you do want to see a friend, how do we actually do this? So parents are then able to discuss with other parent, like just one other parent maybe, in terms of just the safety aspect, and seeing if they can arrange a safe play date outdoors for children to do. Getting your children involved in coming up with activities that you can do as a family, so getting them to choose, getting them to, for example, choose on Friday night is game night. What do you think we should do? Come up with a game that we can play as a family, so that they're actually keeping active as well mentally, and they're thinking and they're being creative and they're taking part, because I think one thing that we should try not to do all the time is sort of just impose what we believe will be right. To help kids to feel better or to become distracted, etc. So just to encourage children to also come up with some ideas to help out in the house in terms of, helping me to choose what we're having for dinner between these two options. So just getting them actively involved in things. And I think teachers, from what I can see in the chat, teachers are doing so much in terms of trying to keep children engaged in different ways. And I think just continuing with that and, sharing ideas. There's a lot of ideas that are being, shared, and they're agreeing on, so many things that they've tried. And I think that needs to continue. Teachers need to continue to share ideas and try and figure out the best way to engage other aspects of learning, not just the academic stuff, because I think that's what a lot of people have been worried about academics and marks dropping, etc. But how are we now making sure that we're looking after children as a whole, not just intellectually, but how are we incorporating all of those other aspects of learning so that they can feel a little bit more balanced, And I think exercise goes a long way. Laura touched on this in terms of being outdoors, being active, burning off all that built up energy so that at nighttime they're passed out by 8 p.m. I mean, I think we we all would appreciate that, you know, so just getting them to really just utilize all of their senses and just different parts of their brain, you know, being creative, as well as making sure that they're staying as up to date as possible with regards to whatever their scholastic requirements are.
To the point, Rebetsu, how to answer questions, and Vanessa touched on this, that time of anxiety, no certainty for parents, which you hopefully aren't exposing your kids to, you know, all of that, but how to answer difficult questions and create a containing environment. So being honest, but not completely lying to your child. So you may not have the answers, but you're still parenting, containing, and creating some kind of horizon of expectations that mom has got this, or dad has got this, or in fact, my teacher, Sibusiso, has got this. How to do that as adults?
So I think, I mean, I truly believe in honesty, because I think that children can tell when you are lying or when you are, you know, trying to hide certain aspects from them that are important for them at that age to know, because the story doesn't make sense. So being honest is really important, but then also considering the age of your child. So, you know, there are certain bits of information that you would not share with a 3-4-year-old that you might feel comfortable sharing with a 15-year-old, because they just have that emotional maturity to understand certain things. So just being honest in terms of, this is what's going on, but this isn't for you to worry about. Mommy and daddy are going to manage it, you know. Mr. Sibusiso is dealing with that. That's not an aspect that you need to worry about. You just need to do your part, which is 1, 2, 3, which is come to school and you make sure that you wear your mask and you sanitize, etc. Everything else is taken care of. So just reassuring them, but also being realistic. The fact is, things are not the same. Things are different. There are restrictions in place. But yeah, just creating that sense of safety in terms of, there are things that you're responsible for, but then there are other things that you really don't need to worry about. And I think a lot of teachers have had to do a lot of reassuring in that sense, especially for learners that have come back to school and they're feeling a little bit anxious. They've had to do a lot of work in terms of trying to help them to manage with being exposed and being back in the schooling environment and all of the emotions that come with that. And I think parents the same. Parents have had to do a lot of reassuring and explaining, but my thing is always be honest, but always in an age-appropriate manner, depending on your child.
Absolutely. All right. I'm just double checking, waiting on confirmation on those breakout sessions, if we're going to chop them down a little bit. So I know that we just need to, there's some pertinent comments coming through on the chat as well. So Vanessa, to that point, the kind of language containing sort of setting of expectations that parents are talking about having. I know at some point we kind of had to sort of turn down the news a little bit and, you know, not just, and then do damage control when my daughter came home, and it became a matter of so-and-so's parents are saying so-and-so's, you know, is dealing with a death in the family, and having to be ready to answer those difficult conversations. We're 18 months into this, but we're still, you know, having unexpected questions being popped our way. How has your village dealt with this? And I'm guessing you've workshopped sort of, you know, ways to handle this.
Well, you know, one of the funniest things I find is that I'm the most unpopular person in the Western Cape amongst teenagers. They really hate me because they believe I can control some kind of cult which keeps them home and tells them they're not allowed to get up to any mischief. But actually, funny enough, when you bring a collection of parents together, the learnings are so completely different to what those children would expect. And one of them, and I think this is one of the most important things that we've maybe taught each other, is that ourselves as a generation of parents, and I presume I'm on the very oldest side from this group of people, is that we were brought up in a very disciplinary and very hierarchical way. Mom and dad were very powerful. They were at the top. You didn't question them. You were seen and not heard. You did what they were told. We were loved and we had a lot of freedom, but perhaps, and this is something I think this generation of older kids need so much, is patience faith in their outcome, and respect. And finding that line between teaching them, treating them, and I'm talking specifically about the older children here, teaching them as people with agency is so important. And it gives people such a sense of resilience to be treated with that agency and respect, whatever age they're at. And I think it was something we could have learned from the way we were taught. So not to infantilize or belittle, but to treat them with respect, as to be careful about what we are actually telling them and how we involve them, but giving them that sense of their own power and belief in them. Because if your mom and dad believe in you and believe in your resilience and give you that kind of, and listen to you and hear what you have to say without closing you down, and if school does that as well. And I just wanted to bring up one example, which I thought was so exciting. The school that my own children are at have done away with prefects, and they brought in guardians. And they and those guardians, and in those guardians, they have mentors. And so what you have done, what they've done by that, is that even in this time of great upheaval and stress, they've said the need we have is not to be hierarchical, it's not to be controlling, it's not to be a disciplinarian, it's to actually be a source of guidance, a source of support, a source of respect and encouragement. And you know, it's almost a cliche, but once you set down those old rules and you open up that space for teenagers particularly, it is amazing how they behave and how their behavior improves, because they are at a stage where their life was supposed to be opening up, and they were supposed to be flying, and they were supposed to be getting up to no good. And yet here they are at home, trapped, restricted, with so much of their joy taken away from them. So actually accessing their own sense of self and giving them those three very simple things: faith in their outcomes, respect for what they have to say and for who they are, and respect, faith in their outcomes, and I forgot the other one for a minute, but it builds their resilience. Patience, the most underrated parental and teacher skill, life skill, patience. But those three things really build resilience in a team.
All right, just to confirm, yes, we are doing away with the breakout sessions. Of course, we are running behind. So we are doing away with the breakaway sessions. The energy, the comments in the chat are absolutely fantastic. So I'm just going to incorporate them into our conversations and just aim the comments or the questions, the comments in the chat towards various panelists. But if you do have questions, pop them in the chat or put them in the Q&A box, and let's just maintain that energy, guys. It's really fantastic. But to your point, Vanessa, you were saying they're supposed to be breaking free and up to no good. And I think what's really happening, and Laura, Riabetsui, and Spusiso, you'll correct me here, but I think what's also happening with COVID as well, and the circumstances under which teachers are having to teach, parents are having to parent, is we're all being forced to actually reframe how we understand growing up, reframe how we understand education, and maybe that being up to no good is fundamentally, essentially, just a phase of growing up. It's just adventure. It's just finding yourself, you know, beyond the parameters of mom and school and the usual guidelines. So it's a really interesting time. But of course, the reason we're having this discussion today, courtesy of BIC Stationery, is that keeping this all in our heads, all in our minds, and as Laura said, utilizing our hearts in order to make sure this works optimally as well, can be such a challenge, right? It really can be such a challenge. Spusiso, I'm going to come to you regarding, you know, your own perspective, the importance of fostering creativity in the classroom and beyond, and the benefits of a more creative approach to teaching. And I guess if you're a teacher who has a more creative approach to teaching, you're also a human being that has a more creative approach to life in general, including parenting, right? The benefits of that, what it does for you, and the trickle-down effects for a child in the home or that student and learner in the classroom.
Yeah, I think it's so important to foster creativity in the classroom because it solves a lot of problems. I think we had a lot of creative people in national government and local government and provincial government, then we really wouldn't have been caught with our pants down in a pandemic like this. So what we really need to do is to try and bring that out for the kids. There are many examples that I've used to sort of allow kids to be creative and be themselves and to be the best version of themselves. And that is through finding ways of doing things. You know, my grade 11s were fighting with me when we were teaching them about product development, and we were covering a section of packaging. And I said to them, well, you need to go into your mom's cupboard and find whatever is in a package. And then you need to sort of solve the problem of the current package or the current packaging of that particular product. The kids came up with the most genius ideas of changing a Coke bottle into something that is more easily usable. And I mean, I could pitch these to a lot of businesses and they'll be able to make loads of money. They enjoyed the activity. They found it really fun. They were able to think out the box. And when I wasn't happy with the packaging, I said, no, go back home, think about it, think it through. How would you as a consumer want to receive this particular packaging? So we need to find many ways to be creative and to allow our kids to be creative as well. And I like the fact that we must go onto the field and learn business studies theory in the field, on the field rather, play. And you know, the grade 12s and the grade 11s, they hate physical education, but getting them to exercise and to come up with a dance piece, for example, or to switch up this, there was a little dance challenge that was happening on YouTube. And I said, well, pimp it up, make it nicer, make it more creative. And you know, you could see that, okay, that child that struggles with theory is now able to be sensitized by this and is able to be regulated through this activity. So there are many ways in which teachers can use them. Like I said, it's all about using the resources that you have, using and also finding out what the kids have at home and what they can use, and just getting them to engage with each other. A lot of our kids have, you know, been apart from their teachers and the learners as well, and other learners as well. So it's so important to bring them back. So do a group activity, COVID compliance, do everything together so that, you know, we regain that strength and allow them to be creative. Also create that space as a teacher that will allow kids to grow. And the benefits of that are there. The kids are able to perform better in school because they're thinking for themselves. A lot of teachers thought for the kids. And when it's time for exams, they weren't able to engage with the questions and perform better. But now that we've used kids or have allowed kids to be creative in the classroom and to think for themselves, then they're able to attack and or go for those challenging questions in exams as well. And it's worked really well.
Yeah. One comment regarding, or that was talking to Tasneem's earlier comment, saying that, you know, the lack of physical contact, even missing teachers physically in the classroom, has really affected children. Vanessa responding saying, you know, kids have missed all of that, but the mask situation is also blocked to human contact. And Vanessa saying, I'm learning to read eyes. Goodness, we've all learned to read eyes. Lara, from a developmental perspective, children being in a classroom, once we're able to go back in real life, being in a physical classroom, but this mask, right? You're teaching children at the foundation level, but there's this thing over here. Just ways in which teachers can better convey. I mean, I think by now we've learned to enunciate and to shout, right? But ways in which you can better convey a message, your emotion, your intention, despite or in spite of this thing that's keeping you safe, which blocks the smile.
Yeah, it's been a big challenge. And I think especially for little babies, because everything they learn is through the mouth and watching our mouths and mimicking. But, you know, the best invention I've seen are these shields, the face shields, the teachers at our school, the face shields, or the mask with the window, because I really believe a smile goes a long way. I loved one of the comments about smiles. That's very, very sweet. But yeah, I think that's the only, you know, get practical, change the assistive device that we're all using. And as you said, use body language, but it's so important connection. You know, I think we really are touch deprived now. Just hugging is also important. You know, these side hugs, even with learners, you see them a bit hesitant to do those things, and we understand why. But yeah, I would just say teachers get a visor or a window mask for sure.
Another question for you, Lara, from Wendy asking, do you think we should do away with homework?
Absolutely. I've looked a lot and read a lot about the countries that have first, the first world countries with the best education systems and best outcomes for education. They have a lot more play. They only start learning to read when they're 7 years old. They go barefoot to school. Things that we could implement. Yes, we're not first world, but those are things we could implement. And one of them is less homework. So I advocate for less homework. I think if you were teaching as well, if the curriculum allowed, like Sibusiso is advocating as well, children remember when they use their own hands, when they use their own creativity. Like Vanessa has said, when we treat them with respect, that they have this brain that works, and we don't infantilize things, but we treat them with agency, project-based learning. And I really think that can happen in less resourced areas. We just have to change the context. We can't just take the same curriculum and then plug it in different contexts. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, I saw, so you are nodding vigorously when I posed the question of whether homework should be done away with completely. Laura, you've also touched on something that Gudwano from BIC Stationery just had in the introductory comments, the fact that there was BIC did undertake the survey, finding out what the constraints, the conditions under which teachers are working in and teaching under, and how they've been able to, operate during COVID-19. And some insights were that teachers did want, besides playing multiple roles in children's lives, they did want quality curriculums, a richer quality curriculum that they would pass on to their children. So how to infuse that quality that teachers are saying they would like to see, but also building on that question of should homework be done away with? And I saw you agreeing, how do we do all of that with the resources that we have?
I really think that we need to capitalize on the contact time that we have with our learners, to use it to the optimum. Because again, the reason why I don't like giving homework is because I hate being disappointed, because it never gets done. So what I do is that the few minutes that I have in class are really used to engage with the learners as much as possible, and giving them different resources to sort of read at home. Again, you can create things that will allow kids to engage with the content at home without doing the homework, because you've been learning for 8 hours, 7 hours at school. Now you must go back at home and do chores and look after your younger sister, your younger brother, and still do all the other things that you need to do. I mean, there are some kids who still play for sports clubs after school. There are some kids who still go for extra tuition. So that extra burden of homework being done at home is really like, are we punishing the kids by giving them homework? It really just sounds like it, because when I can always leave work and, not do my marking at home. So it's so important for us to use that time that we have with the kids to the optimum. My kids know there's no time for flexi time or time for free periods or anything like that. We're always learning, we're always engaging, and that's how we reach that quality as well. Is to use the time.
Yeah, Vanessa, your experience, your insights when it comes to homework, how much time are parents spending on homework? Because I think it starts pretty early that homework time is not just half an hour, it's not just an hour, it can be up to 2 hours at a young age. And I don't know if there's a correlation between less resourced or better resourced schools, but it seems as though parents are also under that burden, even at the foundation stages. So beyond you saying, listen, I can't teach my engineer kid anything, or I've got a friend who will help with the physics, etc. Even at younger grades, are there complaints or just, people struggling with the burden of schoolwork and almost feeling as though I need to get a degree to do homework with my kids? Because I'm worried that I'm not getting the pedagogy right.
There's a very kind of pervasive problem, I think, across the whole world at the moment with parenting, and that is that we parent through our children, not alongside them. So many parents, I think, are so over-invested and in their child's performance. Maybe it's because of our own fears or uncertainties, but there's helicopter parenting, there's lawnmower parenting, there's basically slave parenting, there's mirroring, doing the same things for your children. And in times of uncertainty, it's really hard to let your child find his own way and stand as good parenting. I truly believe this. A good parent only walks alongside their child. We do nothing for them. We help them do it themselves, no matter what age they're at. So I think one of the things that has really, again, changed for the worse is this notion that the kid alone and the system alone is not actually pretty much good enough. I mean, it's the child who should be going through school, especially at high school, not the parents. So stepping back and slipping into a situation of the cheerleader, the assistant, the kind of assistance when asked, the guide, but not doing it themselves, would liberate parents a lot. And I think it's a very hard job to do for parents because we are so worried. We're not, depending where you are, you're not guaranteed the outcome that you took for certain if you were a white parent, if you're a black parent, and or depending on your demographics, you're struggling with realities which are very different. So again, there's no one size fits all. But my own parenting philosophy and what I've seen work so well is looking at the child as a powerful being and looking at the child as a source of creation and wonder, as opposed to looking at the child as a source of anxiety and fear, and maybe on the far side of that, disappointment. So once you start giving that child opportunity, like we've been speaking about on this panel, and believing in their outcome, things just do tend to go better, because into that space grows resilience, and into that space grows your own sense of and your own path. And what we've also seen in the village is so often the path our teenagers take is so challenging to us. It is so disappointing to us. It triggers us on so many levels that it actually requires a huge amount of self-belief and belief in your child to let them be, and to believe in their outcome, believe in their teachers, and only help and not do it for them. So to come back to the very start of the question, like, what is the issue with homework? Okay. The truth is, as a good parent, you support your child whatever they can deal with, whatever they confront. The school does homework. You do your best to let them do homework. If you live far away, like so many of our kids do, from school, and it takes them an hour and a half or 2 hours to get back home, and then they don't have fantastic resources, they don't have Wi-Fi, you just do the best you can without feeling as if you're failing. The most powerful parents are not the ones that are the most highly resourced. They are not the ones who pay for more tutoring or more after-school extramurals. The most wonderful parents are the ones where the child feels loved and believed in. And that is so, and I do also believe, by the way, the best teachers, and I'm sure we all can agree, were the ones who believed in us. And I was a terrible teenager, and I only got through standard grade maths by my ponytail, because I was pulled that way by the most wonderful teacher who did it for me. And he saw me in the midst of all that bad behavior, and he saw the potential to pass. I didn't even excel, I passed. But that's what belief, not resources, not money, that's what belief can do in a child. And it only takes one adult. And so often that adult is a teacher.
Absolutely. Sure. Really, really well said, Vanessa. To your point about, doing your best, irrespective of your circumstances, messages coming through all over the place regarding homework, circumstances at home, and Chris Lowe saying, yeah, South Africa, our context makes homework very hard, given how many kids commute and what home circumstances are like. So we're all coming, we come to this place called school, but teachers and learners and students alike, just diverse and divergent experiences, right? So it's that emotional, that EQ, that emotional quotient that needs to kick in, and that we need to be cognizant of. So we've got about 5 minutes on the clock. So, do pop your questions or your messages into the chat so I can feel them. And if there's someone, a panelist that you want to address directly, please go ahead and just tag them. We'll keep on taking your comments as well, and I'll throw them into our conversation. But some feedback there as well, Vanessa, that the teachers in our panel discussion are absolutely loving the concept of guardians versus prefects, and that sense of a more sort of equal and egalitarian school community is seems to be very, very well liked. I like that. So let's keep the conversation going. So I just want to chuck something to you. The idea and the sense that teachers have had to, whilst dealing with an added workload, you are also juggling and wearing multiple hats. You're a teacher, you're a social worker. You touched on this and you mentioned very lightly as if it ain't no thing, right? But it's a big deal. You're a teacher, you're a social worker, you might be a psychologist. Now you are also a digital marketer because you're figuring out TikTok and you're doing all these things online. Give me a sense of just how and where you can turn to when you need to bring in interventions, urgent interventions for your learners.
Are you talking interventions in terms of curriculum with the academics?
They could be curriculum, they could also be psychological, right? Especially in you say you were lucky in a school to be in a school where you do have a counselor. For teachers that find themselves in an environment where that does not exist, what do you suggest they go ahead and do? Who do they reach out to?
Yeah, I think for psychological intervention, I always say to my kids, because I'm also a grade head at my school, is that I always say, you know, the therapist may not be able to see you until after 8 weeks. So the best thing to do is let's create a space, you and I, let's talk during break, during class, tell me about what it is that you're going through. And really, kids really want somebody who's going to listen to them. And, you know, we need to find different ways in which we as teachers need to be sensitive around the things that the kids tell us as well. So if a child says, "Sir, please don't tell anyone about this," or "I want to chat to you about my boyfriend or my girlfriend," or whatever it is that they want to talk to you about, create that space and give your elderly advice about those things. How I also intervene with the academics is that I have extra lessons after school. I have online classes as well. The kids always know that they can pop in a question on WhatsApp and ask me a question. I always encourage them to ask me the questions on the group so that other kids can also see and, you know, to keep the momentum going also in the group. I also throw in links to different YouTube videos. I know I'm not the only teacher that does this. So also for them to get a feel of other educators as well who are also online. So just exposing the kids to the many different platforms as well is also a great deal.
All right, fantastic. We are going to close very shortly, but I just want to reiterate that if you'd like to keep this conversation going and you're enjoying the kinds of questions and comments and interactions that are taking place in today's BIC Teachers webinar, please go ahead onto Facebook and do join the BIC Stationery Teachers Group, right? This is a community that is always there to help you with your needs, your questions, to support you, and for you guys to just TikTok those ideas of how do we do this, best practice, what's worked for you, what can I try? I think that's a fantastic initiative that BIC has started. Go ahead, check it out on Facebook and just join. It is a private group, so it's a contained and safe environment in a safe space. Please do yourself a favor and just join that group. Another quick one, Vanessa, if you don't mind, just regarding a question around the guardian system. How many guardians are there to one mentor and the role that the mentor plays in primary school? That's from Karushni.
So first, let me give credit to the school. It is Westerford High School in the Western Cape. And they are fantastic in that they are so forward thinking and so committed to getting it right. Not always right, but always committed to getting it right. So the way the Guardian program appears to work is that they have just replaced prefects and the system of prefects, which in my opinion were about disciplines, agents of the state, you know, a sort of hierarchical system of power, just spread one set down with a group of peers who are there to support, encourage, acknowledge. Acknowledgement is so huge. Those prefects are broken up into into pairs who deal with issues like culture, spirit, academics, and then the biggest group is mentors. And the way I see that as being so incredibly brilliant is that a mentor will take a small child coming into a grade 8 coming into the school and encourage them and show them the way forward not actually put them in their place, which was the old method. And you look at the old traditional schools with the systems there and the kind of and the pervasive toxin that is bullying. And you can see that unless the infrastructures in these schools change, and look to themselves, let go of them clinging on to legacy and the way things were as if that was good, and change and break down the system and find something better, things will not change. It's all very well, I mean, bullying we can deal with on the subject for another day. I'm sure teachers have so much to say about it. But once you take what was and change it into what could be, you look at this, the infrastructure holds these kids. It holds their development, it holds their future, it holds their potential, and gives them a different North Star to follow. And this is what I believe our one little school has done by doing this, by dismantling the whole system that was in place for so many years. So just another short answer to the question, there are 8 mentors, which also shows the priority and the importance that is placed on that function, and on giving every grade 8 the best and the most supportive and the most filled with opportunity start at the school. And I love it. I'm so happy about it. I'm so proud. Can you tell?
We absolutely can tell. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for everyone who participated in today's webinar discussions. Thanks for all the activity in the chats. It's been absolutely fantastic. I think I'm not going to be able to say it any better than what Vanessa has said. Vanessa Rietbach saying to everyone, thank you for holding this at a time convenient for teachers. So often discussions are held during school hours. Hope all teachers there had a wonderful Teachers' Day. But the sort of resounding feedback and sentiment, guys, is that this has been so very helpful, right? That validation is necessary. You need someone to say, hey, educators, we understand what you're going through, understand what you've been through, and it's absolutely valid, but here are more ways in which we can hold each other, support each other, and help each other on the journey forward. So as we come to the end of our time here today, I'm just going to reiterate once again and thank the panelists for that very valuable input. It's been really, really fantastic. Thank you to the people who joined the webinar, who signed on, who registered. And yeah, a big thank you to BIC Stationery, for making all of this possible today. It really, really was so important and so necessary. Thank you all for joining. I hope you've learned something. Hope you're feeling encouraged. I hope you're feeling reinvigorated as educators, and even those parents that did join us as well. Of course, educators are parents too. So if you are not part of the BIC Stationery Teachers group on Facebook, please head on over to Facebook, join the group, and I encourage you to join. You'll receive tips, you'll receive information. You also get the inside scoop on promotions, always a good thing in our fiscal environment. And we're sharing a link for now. You should be seeing that on your screen. So go and join if you're not a member yet of the BIC Stationery Teachers group. Thank you so much. Have a lovely week from all of us on the panel. It's goodbye. Stay safe, stay energized, and stay focused on your mission to educate and, of course, impact positively the future of our country. Thank you.